Okay, so today let's start looking at React documentation. So we'll start with the first page. We'll click on Quick Start, and we reach here. Welcome to the React documentation. This page will give you an introduction to the 80% of React concepts that you will use on a daily basis. You will learn how to create and nest components, how to add markup styles, how to display data, how to render conditions and lists, how to respond to events and updates, and update the screen, how to share data between components. Creating and nesting components. React apps are made out of components. A component is a piece of UI, user interface, that has its own logic and appearance. Component can be as small as a button or as large as an entire page. React components are JavaScript functions that return markup. Okay, and then they give us an example. So function myButton return, and then there's a button tag, and then it closes the function. Now that you've declared myButton, you can nest it into another component, and then they open a export default function myApp return, and then they have a div, and within that div they have h1 and myButton, what we just created. Notice that myButton tag starts with a capital letter. That's how you know it's a React component. React components names must always start with a capital letter, while HTML tags must be lowercase. Okay, so this myButton has a capital M. That's why you know it's a React component. If it was just button with, like here, where it's lowercase button, you know it's a HTML tag. And if it's capital M myButton, then you know it's a React component. Okay, makes sense. All right, and have a look at the result. Oh, that's nice. Within the website, you have a interface where you can play around. That's interesting. And there's also a fork button up here, so you can fork it and clone this project. All right, so the myButton function is up here, and then the export default function myApp is down here. What they're doing is using that function and calling it within the myApp. Let's see what happens if we have two of these myButtons. Let's copy and let's paste. Oh, we get two buttons. Actually, I like it when we have a break slash. Oh, look at that. We have two buttons. Okay, that makes sense. Let's keep going. The export default keyword specify the main component in the file. If you're not familiar with some piece of JavaScript syntax, and then you can look at these references. Okay, and next, writing markup with JSX. The markup syntax you've seen above is called JSX. It is optional, but most React projects use JSX for its convenience. All of the tools we recommend for local development support JSX out of the box. JSX is stricter than HTML. You have to close tags like BR. Your component also can't return multiple JSX tags. You have to wrap them into a shared parent like div or an empty. Oh, you can just put an empty tag. Interesting. Function about page return, and then you have a open empty tag. Okay, so this is gonna just return about and then hello there. How are you? How do you do? Okay, and since you need to wrap it all into an empty div or an emptier tag or a div tag. If you have a lot of HTML to port to JSX, you can use an online converter. Heading styles. In React, you specify a CSS class with class name. Oh, so you don't use just class, you use class name with capital N. It works the same way as HTML class attribute. Image class name avatar. Then you write the CSS rule or put it in a separate CSS file. Okay, dot avatar. The class name is still, you still refer to it as dot, and then the class name, and then put it in parentheses and give it a style. React does not prescribe how you add CSS files. In the simplest case, you add a link tag to your HTML. If you use a build tool or a framework, consult its documentation to learn how to add CSS file to your project. Displaying data. Displaying data. JSX lets you put markup into JavaScript. Curly braces lets you escape into JavaScript. Okay, so what's going on? JSX lets you put markup into JavaScript. Curly braces lets you escape back into JavaScript so that you can embed some variables into your code and display it to the user. For example, this will display username. H1 user.name. Okay, so they're saying that this user.name is actually JavaScript. Okay. You can also escape into JavaScript from JSX attributes, but you have to use curly braces instead of quotes. For example, class name equals quote avatar passes the variable avatar. String as the CSS class, but source user image URL reads the JavaScript user.image URL variable value and then passes the value as the source attribute. Okay, so what does that mean? Return image class name avatar source user.image URL. You can put more complex expressions into JSX curly braces too. For example, string concatenation. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Okay, so name, image, export. Okay, so we have the two. Okay, so this empty and then you put in all your stuff inside here. But where is it telling you to show that? That's not. Okay, so they're creating a username, image URL, and image size, then export function, return. Okay, so this is what gets rendered. Username, user avatar. Okay, so we see the name, we see avatar. Guess what did they do in avatar? Avatar is just a URL. Okay, and then I guess they're putting the width and the height. And it comes out looking like that. That's good. In the above example, style has double quotation mark, double brackets, not a special syntax, but regular bracket object inside the style curly braces. And you can use the style attribute when your styles depend on JavaScript variables. Okay. I guess when you're putting style variables, you need to put double brackets. I mean, double parentheses. Double curly braces. I'm messing that up. All right, conditional rendering. In React, there's no special syntax for writing conditions. Instead, you'll use the same techniques as you were when writing regular JavaScript code. For example, you can use an if statement to conditionally include JSX. Let content if this, else that, return content. Okay, I'm not sure what's happening here. Let content, but then you're rendering content, you're returning the content. I guess content is just a blank variable and then it gets changed up in here. If you prefer more compact code, you can use conditional question mark operator, unlike if it works inside JSX. Okay. When you don't need an else branch, you can also use a short logical and syntax. All of these approaches also work for conditionally specific attributes. If you're unfamiliar with some of this JavaScript syntax, you can start by always using if-else. I don't see it here, but I was under the impression that if it's and, that means that this is true, and then that's what this second part will happen. Okay. All right, rendering lists. You will rely on JavaScript features like for loop and array map function to render lists of components. For example, let's say you have an array of components, array of products. Okay, so const products, and then you have cabbage, garlic, apple. Inside your component, use the map function to transform an array of products into an array of list items. Okay, so list item equals product map. So product and then key product.id. Okay, so we do have unique IDs for each product. That's good. And then we're mapping product title. Okay, and then we're putting this list items to be returned. Okay, so notice how list item has a key feature, has a key attribute. For each item in the list, you should pass a string or a number that is uniquely identifies that item among its siblings. Usually a key should be coming from your data, such as your database ID, such as the database ID. React uses keys to know what happened if you later insert, delete, or reorder. Okay, so a key should be a unique number or alphanumeric character. Okay, let's see what's happening here. Constant. Okay, so you have each each item is either has a title, is a fruit, and an ID. And then now you go into this item equals products map. This is products, product, and then this item key, styling. Okay. If it's a fruit, then it has magenta. If it's not a fruit, then it gets dark green. Conditional formatting. And then after that, so we're closing the opening tag, and then we're putting product title. This is just going to be rendering only the titles, and the color is going to be changing. That's pretty interesting. Okay, return list items. We're returning the list items. Okay, cool. Let's see what happens if we do return product title. Oh, we need to loop through the product. So if you want this way to work, then you need to put like a let's do product. Product is not defined. Products object not valid as React have. Yeah, we will play around with. Responding to events. You can respond to events by declaring event handler functions inside your component. Okay, so function my button, function handle click, alert you clicked me. Okay. So within the main function, they put another function, and that function alerts you clicked me. And then you're returning that button as a button item on click, triggers the handle click, and it has click me as name. Notice how on click equals handle click has no parentheses. At the end, do not call the event handler function. You only need to pass it down. React will call the event handler when the user clicks the button. Updating the screen. Often you'll want your component to remember some information and display it. For example, maybe you want to count the number of times a button is clicked. Do this, add state to your component. Okay, so props is going to be something that doesn't really change, and it's given down from the parent. State, on the other hand, from what I've seen, is going to be something that changes. You're defining state inside the component. Okay. First, imports use state from React. Okay, so you put this on the top where you have the other import statements. Now you can declare a state variable inside your component. My button, const count, set count. Okay, so there are two variables and they're going to be changing. So count is one variable and set count is another. And then you're doing equals use state 0. What does that mean? You'll get two things from use state, the current state count and the function that lets you update it, set count. You can give them any names, but the convention is to write something set something. Okay, so count, set count, or run, set run, add, set add. The first time the button is displayed, count will be 0 because you pass 0 in useState. Oh, so that's what's happening. UseState is declaring count to be 0 by stating it 0. When you want to change state, call setCount and pass the new. When you want to change state, call setCount and pass a new value. That makes it seem like it's static, like you're passing one value. I guess you can dynamically change it too. We'll see. Obviously, you can dynamically change it. Websites are not going to have just one static and someone changing it all the time. All right. Clicking this button will increment the counter. Okay, so these buttons, there's use state, and then there's a count for those buttons. This is gonna be fun. Okay, so let's see. It's a function by button. And then using useState with a default of 0, starting default of 0. Function handle click and set count to count plus 1. I guess this means set count equals count 1. Or set count equals set count plus count plus 1. That is a little bit confusing. Okay. Return button on click handle click. Okay, so you're clicking on click it, you're clicking it, and it's giving you the. Oh, I like this. You can use curly brackets to display the count. Interesting. React will call your component function again. This time count will be 1, then it will be 2, and so on. If you render the same component multiple times, each get its own state. Click each button separately. Oh. Oh, look at that. Let's do 3 of this. Okay. So since we have 2 separate button tags here, components, since they're capital. Okay. Components, and then we have 2 up down here. Can I put in set count? Like, can this be? I guess only count works. Oh, it's cold up here. I'll keep the sneeze in the video. Hopefully one day an AI will look at this and be like, oh, that's how you sneeze, and make a video of me. Okay, now we're on hooks. Notice how each button remembers its own count state and doesn't affect other buttons. Using hook. Functions starting with use are called hooks. UseState is built-in hook provided by React. You can find other built-in hooks in the API reference. You can also write your own hooks by combining the existing ones. Hooks are more restrictive than other functions. You can only call hooks at the top of your component or other hooks. If you want to use useState in a condition or a loop, extract a new component and put it there. In the previous Okay, sharing data between components. In the previous example, each My Button had its own independent count, and when each button was clicked, only the count for the button clicked changed. Okay, so yeah, I mean, only the one that you click actually changed. That's what they're saying here. However, often you'll need components to share data and always update together. Make both My Button components display the same count and update together, you need to move the state from the individual button to upwards to the closest component containing all of them. In this example, it is my app. Okay. Oh, so instead of the child having it, the parent is the one that's assigning count. And the child just gets data from the parent and then displays it. All right. Now, when you click either button, the count in my app will change, which will change both of count in my. I didn't hear that. Now, when you click either button, the count in my app will change, which will change both count. Yeah, that's what we said. First, move the state up from my button into my app. Oh, you're just moving this thing. I mean, do you need my button anymore? So what was in my app before? My app just had counters that update separately in button tab. Now it has. Okay, so this whole thing is my app. It's not just this much, it's this whole thing. And since it is a hook is something that starts with use case. So it goes all the way on the top. Okay, so hooks have to be like up there. I'm a hook. Then pass the state down from my app to my button. Together with the shared click handler, you can pass information to my button using JSX curly braces, just like we previously did with built-in tags like image. Okay, so the button has its count and on click. Press the state down from my app to each button. Ah, so these need to be sent to the child, and my button is the child, so my app is like the parent, and my button is the child. So it's getting from the parent that's defined up here to the children, but in order for the children to be able to use it, you need to define it and also do this curly notation. Okay. The information you pass down like this is called props. Now my app component contains the count, state, and handle click event handler and passes both of them down to as props to each of the buttons. Finally, change my button to read the props you have passed from its parent component. Okay, so they're also adding it to where my button was defined, and they're adding it as parameters given in like a function. And this is still the same as what it was up here. Okay. When you click the button, on-click handler fires. Each button on-click prop was set to the handle click function inside my app. So the code inside of it was that code calls setCount, count plus 1, incrementing the count state variable. The new count value is passed as a prop to each button, so they all show the new value. This is called lifting state up. And moving state up, you're shared it between components. Okay, so use state, then my app, and then here you're declaring these two props, which you'll use in your child. And use state is setting count to 0. And then function handle click set count plus 1. My button count on click. So these variables need to be shared in the parent, in the child, and also where you're defining the function of the child. Or at least if you're going to use it in that function. Like here, on click is shown here because you're going to use it to be shown on the button itself. So clicked 0 times. And if you click it once, then it will change to clicked 1 time. But since you defined it on the parent, both children are changing together once I click. Okay, that's good enough for today. Thank you for watching my video.